Good evening and welcome to RTO Doctors 30 Days, 30 Tips second series. And tonight I'd like to talk to you briefly about offshore delivery. First of all, I'd like to begin by what is offshore delivery. Offshore delivery can be partial delivery or complete delivery. It can also be undertaken in partnership with other companies or organisations or individuals. Effectively, it is any delivery that is undertaken outside Australia. It can also be considered online. So online offshore delivery would take place where the student who is enrolled in your program or your prospective student is actually a resident of a country outside of Australia. And they would be listing their residential address or where they are currently staying, residing, where the certification needs to be delivered to, wherever that address is. If it's outside Australia, it's also considered offshore delivery. One of the things that you need to be mindful of in relation to offshore delivery is the ASQA fees and charges. There are different charges that apply to the monitoring of compliance in relation to offshore delivery, and it's probably a good time to take a look at that because the ASQA fees and charges the proposed ASQA fees and charges schedule has just been released in draft format and is seeking feedback as well. So if you haven't looked at that already, you might want to do so, and just be mindful that there are additional fees involved for monitoring compliance with offshore delivery. One of the things that we often get asked in relation to offshore delivery is, do I need to be a CRICOS provider so that I can deliver offshore? And the answer to that is no, not if you're taking students who are not overseas students in accordance with the definition under the ESOS Act. So the ESOS Act is very specific in relation to what is considered an overseas student, and it is any student who is a holder or a potential holder of a student visa under the migration regulations in Australia. So if your offshore students are not holders or potential intending holders of student visas in Australia under the migration regulations, then they would not be considered overseas students for the purposes of the ESOS Act, and you would not need to be registered as a CRICOS provider to deliver offshore. Having said that, if the student did one day become an international student or an overseas student in accordance with the ESOS Act, and they had undertaken an Australian qualification offshore, you would be required, if they applied for credit transfer or recognition of prior learning, you would be required to recognise that learning and apply it to any course durations under Standard 12 of the National Code Part D. However, if they don't apply for it, then there's no obligation on you to recognise it and shorten the duration of their COEs or confirmations of enrolment as a result. There's often a little bit of confusion around that, actually. It is a requirement that as a provider, you offer national recognition or recognition of prior learning, but it's not an obligation on the student to accept it. So if you offer it, but the student doesn't accept it, then that's a completely different issue. The issue becomes where you don't offer it and the student is requesting it. That's the issue around the standards. But anyway, that's a different topic for a different day. In terms of notifying ASQA, the requirement is that you are supposed to notify ASQA as soon as practicable after the change occurs and within 90 days. It's probably important at this moment to also remind you that in 2015, ASQA did a pilot audit program in relation to international education and in particular offshore delivery. That particular program identified a range of strengths and weaknesses that will no doubt be carried into what has recently been announced as of yesterday, which is ASQA's annual national strategy for compliance reviews, which is for 2017-2018 international education, and that is consisting of CRICOS providers and offshore delivery. So if you are an offshore delivery provider, you may want to take a look back at that ASQA audit pilot program in 2015 and just review some of the findings of that and make sure that you've taken them into consideration in your own offshore delivery this time round before, if you get audited. I may spend some time just adding some links in the comments. If I don't get around to it today, I might do it in the next day or two. But that's something to be mindful of. Some of the other issues that you need to be mindful of in and around offshore delivery are around things such as certification. So if your qualification, for example, has been delivered in a language other than English, then there are certain requirements in relation to the Australian qualifications framework that need to be met. And I also forgot to mention, at the very beginning, offshore delivery in the context of what we're talking about is nationally recognised training. So anything that is a qualification or an accredited course in Australia. So I'm not referring to hobby courses, I'm not referring to non-accredited training, only nationally accredited training, nationally recognised training. Some of the challenges that are involved in delivering offshore are appropriate resourcing of the facility and courses that you are wanting to offer. One of the biggest issues we find is that people don't spend sufficient time working on the Australian workplace context when they're delivering and assessing the qualifications to ensure that the assessments still meet the principles of assessment, rules of evidence and training package requirements. Some of the other issues or challenges that people frequently face are around trainer and assessor competency and currency, and ensuring that the people that they have training in assessing these qualifications overseas or skill sets or short course units, making sure that those trainers and assessors have sufficient qualifications, industry experience and currency appropriate to the units of competency that they're actually delivering. One of the other bigger areas of concern or challenge with offshore delivery is around record keeping. Now, if you don't have an intranet service, for example, where all of your documents are effectively uploaded into the cloud, and no matter where you are, people can access those documents, policies, procedures, forms, training and assessment materials, whatever the case may be, you're going to find it very difficult to maintain some sort of record-keeping system. And that is a real challenge when you're delivering in one country that is completely different to another, is ensuring that consistency in record-keeping requirements. Another area is the monitoring of any partnership arrangements. So if your offshore delivery is primarily in relation to a partnership arrangement that you have with somebody else delivering on your behalf offshore, then that would be subject to a partnership arrangement that you would have notified to ASQA, and you would be making sure that you are monitoring that arrangement as effectively and compliantly as possible, and sometimes that's not always easy. And last and not least, of course, is the challenge of diversity and language when you're delivering offshore, particularly if you're in a country where English is not their first language, and there are different cultural norms that you have to respect and address as well. So, for example, if you're going into a Hindu or Buddhist type society, or you're going into a culture where Indonesian might be the primary language, or Chinese, which has got a completely different alphabet and calligraphy and everything. And being able to be understood and understand your students is a key challenge in those particular circumstances as well. So just a quick reminder that ASQA did release their regulatory strategy yesterday on the 22nd of August. It is available on their website under the latest news section. As mentioned previously, I'll try and put a link to it in today's 30 Days, 30 Tips. Otherwise, there is also, for those people who are currently delivering offshore or considering delivering offshore, the ASQA 2015 pilot audit program that was conducted that identified a whole range of strengths and weaknesses to offshore delivery programs that I am almost certain ASQA will be picking up again as part of their regulatory strategy next year. I hope that tonight's tip has been helpful for you, and we look forward to seeing you again tomorrow night. Just a quick reminder that in the next week we have a partnership with Understand TAE and Lauren Hollows coming up on trainer and assessor competency and currency. We also have Bruno Cozzi from Blue Gem, who will be talking to us about VETMIS compliance systems and learning management systems. So hopefully, between those two partnership delivery programs on our 30 Days, 30 Tips program, you will also get to get some really specialist information in some areas that are quite niche for both Lauren and Bruno, who are specialists in those areas today. Please follow us for those. There will be discounts and things available for all of our followers who are participating on those live streams, and we look forward to seeing you. Take care and bye for now.